In the Matter of a Private by Rudyard Kipling. Hurrah, hurrah, a soldier's life for me. Shout, boys, shout, for it makes you jolly and free. The Ramrod Chorus. People who have seen say that one of the quaintest spectacles of human frailty is an outbreak of hysterics in a girls' school. It starts without warning. Generally on a hot afternoon among the elder pupils, a girl giggles till the giggle gets beyond control. Then she throws up her head and cries honk, honk, honk like a wild goose, and tears mix with the laughter. If the mistress be wise, she will rap out something severe at this point to check matters. If she be tender-hearted, and send for a drink of water. The chances are largely in favor of another girl laughing at the afflicted one and herself, collapsing. Thus the trouble spreads and may end in half of what answers to the lower sixth of a boys' school rocking and whooping together, given a week of warm weather, 2 stately promenades per diem, a heavy mutton and rice meal in the middle of the day, a certain amount of nagging from the teachers, and a few other things. Some amazing effects develop. At least this is what folks say who have had experience. Now the Mother Superior of a convent and the Colonel of a British infantry regiment would be justly shocked at any comparison being made between their respective charges. But it is a fact that under certain circumstances, Thomas in bulk can be worked up into dithering, rippling hysteria. He does not weep, but he shows his trouble unmistakably, and the consequences get into the newspapers, and all the good people who hardly know a martini from a Snyder say, take away the brute's ammunition. Thomas isn't a brute, and his business, which is to look after the virtuous people, demands that he shall have his ammunition to his hand. He doesn't wear silk stockings, and he really ought to be supplied with a new adjective to help him to express his opinions. But for all that, he is a great man if you call him the heroic defender of the national honor one day, and a brutal and licentious soldiery the next. You naturally bewilder him, and he looks upon you with suspicion. There is nobody to speak for Thomas, except people who have theories to work off on him, and nobody understands Thomas except Thomas, and he does not always know what is the matter with himself. That is the prologue. This is the story. Corporal Slane was engaged to be married to Miss Jauncey M. Kenna, whose history is well known in the regiment and elsewhere. He had his colonel's permission, and being popular with the men, every arrangement had been made to give the wedding what Private Ortheris called éclat. It fell in the heart of the hot weather, and after the wedding Slane was going up to the hills with the bride. None the less Slane's grievance was that the affair would be only a hired carriage wedding, and he felt that the éclat of that was meager. Miss M. Kenna did not care so much. The sergeant's wife was helping her to make her wedding dress, and she was very busy. Slane was just then the only moderately contented man in barracks. All the rest were more or less miserable, and they had so much to make them happy too. All their work was over at 8 in the morning, and for the rest of the day they could lie on their backs and smoke canteen plug and swear at the punkakulis. They enjoyed a fine full-flesh meal in the middle of the day, and then threw themselves down on their cots and sweated and slept till it was cool enough to go out with their townie, whose vocabulary contained less than 600 words, and the adjective, and whose views on every conceivable question they had heard many times before. There was the canteen, of course, and there was the temperance room with the second-hand papers in it, but a man of any profession cannot read for 8 hours a day in a temperature of 96 degrees or 98 degrees, in the shade, running up sometimes to 103 degrees. At midnight very few men, even though they get a pannikin of flat, stale, muddy beer and hide it under their cots, can continue drinking for 6 hours a day. One man tried, but he died, and nearly the whole regiment went to his funeral, because it gave them something to do. It was too early for the excitement of fever or cholera. The men could only wait and wait and wait, and watch the shadow of the barrack creeping across the blinding white dust that was a gay life. They lounged about cantonments. It was too hot for any sort of game, and almost too hot for vice, and fuddled themselves in the evening, and filled themselves to distension with the healthy nitrogenous food provided for them. And the more they stoked, the less exercise they took, and more explosive they grew. Then tempers began to wear away, and men fell a brooding over insults, real or imaginary, for they had nothing else to think of. The tone of the repartees changed, and instead of saying light-heartedly, "Ill, knock your silly face in," men grew laboriously polite, and hinted that the cantonments were not big enough for themselves and their enemy, and that there would be more space for one of the two in another place. It may have been the devil who arranged the thing, but the fact of the case is that Lawson had for a long time been worrying Simmons in an aimless way. It gave him occupation. The two had their cots side by side, and would sometimes spend a long afternoon swearing at each other. But Simmons was afraid of Lawson, and dared not challenge him to a fight. He thought over the words in the hot, still nights, and half the hate he felt toward Lawson be vented on the wretched punkah coolie. Lawson bought a parrot in the bazaar and put it into a little cage, and lowered the cage into the cool darkness of a well, and sat on the well curb shouting bad language down to the parrot. He taught it to say Simmons, Isua, which means swine, and several other things entirely unfit for publication. He was a big gross man, and he shook like a jelly when the parrot had the sentence correctly. Simmons, however, shook with rage, for all the room were laughing at him. The parrot was such a disreputable puff of green feathers, and it looked so human. When it chattered, Lawson used to sit swinging his fat legs on the side of the cot, and ask the parrot what it thought of Simmons. The parrot would answer Simmons, "Ye sewer good boy." Lawson used to say, scratching the parrot's head, "Ye ear that Sim." And Simmons used to turn over on his stomach and make answer, "I ear." "Take aid, you don't ear something one of these days." In the restless nights, after he had been asleep all day, fits of blind rage came upon Simmons, and held him till he trembled all over, while he thought in how many different ways he would slay Lawson. Sometimes he would picture himself trampling the life out of the man with heavy ammunition boots, and at others smashing in his face with the butt, and at others jumping on his shoulders and dragging the head back till the neckbone cracked. Then his mouth would feel hot and fevered, and he would reach out for another sup of the beer in the pannikin. But the fancy that came to him most frequently and stayed with him longest was one connected with the great roll of fat under Lawson's right ear. He noticed it first on a moonlight night, and thereafter it was always before his eyes. It was a fascinating roll of fat. A man could get his hand upon it and tear away one side of the neck, or he could place the muzzle of a rifle on it and blow away all the head in a flash. Lawson had no right to be sleek and contented and well todo when he, Simmons, was the butt of the room. Some day, perhaps, he would show those who laughed at the Simmons Isua joke that he was as good as the rest, and held a man's life in the crook of his forefinger. When Lawson snored, Simmons hated him more bitterly than ever. Why should Lawson be able to sleep when Simmons had to stay awake hour after hour, tossing and turning on the tapes with the dull liver pain gnawing into his right side, and his head throbbing and aching after canteen? He thought over this for many nights, and the world became unprofitable to him. He even blunted his naturally fine appetite with beer and tobacco, and all the while the parrot talked at and made a mock of him. The heat continued, and the tempers wore away more quickly than before. A sergeant's wife died of heat apoplexy in the night, and the rumor ran abroad that it was cholera. Men rejoiced openly, hoping that it would spread and send them into camp, but that was a false alarm. It was late on a Tuesday evening, and the men were waiting in the deep double verandas for last posts, when Simmons went to the box at the foot of his bed, took out his pipe, and slammed the lid down with a bang that echoed through the deserted barrack like the crack of a rifle. Ordinarily speaking, the men would have taken no notice, but their nerves were fretted to fiddle strings. They jumped up, and 3 or 4 clattered into the barrack room, only to find Simmons kneeling by his box. "Owl, it's you, is it?" they said, and laughed foolishly. "We thought 'twas." Simmons rose slowly. If the accident had so shaken his fellows, what would not the reality do? "You thought it wasted you, and what makes you think?" he said, lashing himself into madness as he went on. "To hell with your thinking, ye dirty spies." Simmons, ye sewer, chuckled the parrot in the veranda, sleepily recognizing a well-known voice now. That was absolutely all. The tension snapped. Simmons fell back on the arm rack. Deliberate lithe men were at the far end of the room and took out his rifle and packet of ammunition. "Don't go playing the goat," Sim said. Lawson put it down, but there was a quaver in his voice. Another man stooped, slipped his boot, and hurled it at Simmons' head. The prompt answer was a shot which, fired at random, found its billet in Lawson's throat. Lawson fell forward without a word, and the others scattered. "You thought it was," yelled Simmons. "You're driven me to it. I tell you, you're driven me to it. Get up, Lawson, and don't lie shammin' there, you and your blasted parrot that druv me to it." But there was an unaffected reality about Lawson's pose. that showed Simmons what he had done. The men were still clamoring on the veranda. Simmons appropriated 2 more packets of ammunition and ran into the moonlight muttering, "Ill, make a night of it, 30 rounds, and the last for myself, take you that you dogs." He dropped on one knee and fired into the brown of the men on the veranda, but the bullet flew high and landed in the brickwork with a vicious fat that made some of the younger ones turn pale. It is as musketry theorists observe one thing to fire and another to be fired at. Then the instinct of the chase flared up. The news spread from barrack to barrack, and the men doubled out intent on the capture of Simmons, the wild beast, who was heading for the cavalry parade ground, stopping now and again to send back a shot and a curse in the direction of his pursuers. "I'll learn you to spy on me," he shouted. "I'll learn you to give me dogs' names. Come on the ole lot o' you." Colonel John Anthony Diva Roman 100 B turned toward the infantry mess and shook his rifle. "You think yourself the devil of a man, but I tell you that if you put your ugly old carcass outside o' that door, I'll make you the poorest looking man in the army. Come out." Colonel John Anthony Diva Roman 100 B, come out and see me practice on the range. I am the crack shot of the old bloomin' battalion, in proof of which statement Simmons fired at the lighted windows of the mess house. "Private Simmons, company on the cavalry parade ground, sir, with 30 rounds," said a sergeant breathlessly to the colonel. "Shootin' right and left, sir." "Shot Private Lawson. What's to be done, sir?" Colonel John Anthony Diva Roman 100 B sallied out, only to be saluted by a spurt of dust at his feet. "Pull up," said the second in command. "I don't want my step in that way, Colonel. He's as dangerous as a mad dog." "Shoot him like one, then," said the colonel bitterly. "If he won't take his chance, my regiment too. If it had been the towheads, I could have understood." Private Simmons had occupied a strong position near a well on the edge of the parade ground, and was defying the regiment to come on. The regiment was not anxious to comply, for there is small honor in being shot by a fellow private. Only Corporal Slain rifle in band threw himself down on the ground and wormed his way toward the well. "Don't shoot," said he to the men round him, "like as not y'all hit me. I'll catch the beggar livin'." Simmons ceased shouting for a while, and the noise of trap wheels could be heard across the plain. Major Olden, commanding the horse battery, was coming back from a dinner in the civil lines, was driving after his usual custom, that is to say, as fast as the horse could go. "A officer, a blooming spangled officer!" shrieked Simmons. "I'll make a scarecrow of that officer." The trap stopped. "What's this?" demanded the major of gunners. "You there, drop your rifle." "Why, it's Jerry Blazes. I ain't got no quarrel with you, Jerry Blazes. Pass freen, and all's well." But Jerry Blazes had not the faintest intention of passing a dangerous murderer. He was, as his adoring battery swore long and fervently, without knowledge of fear. And they were surely the best judges, for Jerry Blazes, it was notorious, had done his possible to kill a man each time the battery went out. He walked towards Simmons with the intention of rushing him and knocking him down. "Don't make me do it, sir," said Simmons. "I ain't got nothing agin you." "Ah, you would." Major broke into a run. "Take that then." The major dropped with a bullet through his shoulder, and Simmons stood over him. He had lost the satisfaction of killing Lawson in the desired way. Hut, here was a helpless body to his hand. Should be slip in another cartridge and blow off the head, or with the butt smash in the white face? He stopped to consider, and a cry went up from the far side of the parade ground. "He's killed Jerry Blazes." But in the shelter of the well pillars, Simmons was safe, except when he stepped out to fire. "I'll blow your ansome eed off, Jerry Blazes," said Simmons reflectively. 6 and 3 is 9, and 1 is 10, and that leaves me another 19, and 1 for myself. He tugged at the string of the second packet of ammunition. Corporal Slain crawled out of the shadow of a bank into the moonlight. "I see you," said Simmons. "Come a bit further on and I'll do for you." "I'm come," said Corporal Slain briefly. "You've done a bad day's work, Sim. Come out air and come back with me." "Come," laughed Simmons, sending a cartridge home with his thumb. "Not before I've settled you and Jerry Blazes." The corporal was lying at full length in the dust of the parade ground, a rifle under him. Some of the less cautious men, in the distance, shouted, "Shoot, I am slain." "You move and or foot slain," said Simmons. "An ill kick, Jerry Blazes, eat in and shoot you after." "I ain't movin'," said the corporal, raising his head. "You daren't hit a man on his legs. Let go, oh, Jerry Blazes, and come out, oh, that with your fists, come and hit me. You daren't, you bloomin' dog shooter." "I dare." "You lie, you mansticker, you sneakin' sheeny butcher, you lie. See, they're slain." Kicked the rifle away and stood up in the peril of his life. "Come on now." The temptation was more than Simmons could resist, for the corporal in his white clothes offered a perfect mark. "Don't misname me," shouted Simmons, firing. As he spoke, the shot missed, and the shooter, blind with rage, threw his rifle down and rushed at Slain from the protection of the well within striking distance. He kicked savagely at Slain's stomach, but the weedy corporal knew something of Simmons' weakness, and knew too the deadly guard for that kick. Bowing forward and drawing up his right leg till the heel of the right foot was set some 3 inches above the inside of the left kneecap, he met the blow standing on one leg exactly as guns stand when they meditate and ready for the fall that would follow. There was an oath. The corporal fell over his own left as shinbone met shinbone, and the private collapsed, his right leg broken an inch above the ankle. "Pity you don't know that guard, Sim," said Slain, spitting out the dust as he rose, then raising his voice, "Come and take him off, I've bruck his leg." This was not strictly true, for the private had accomplished his own downfall, since it is the special merit of that legard that the harder the kick, the greater the kicker's discomfiture. Slain walked to Jerry Blazes and hung over him with ostentatious anxiety, while Simmons, weeping with pain, was carried away. "Ope, you ain't hurt badly, sir," said Slain. The major had fainted, and there was an ugly ragged hole through the top of his arm. Slain knelt down and murmured, "S'elp me, I believe 'e's dead. Well, if that ain't my blooming luck all over." But the major was destined to lead his battery afield for many a long day with unshaken nerve. He was removed and nursed and petted into convalescence, while the battery discussed the wisdom of capturing Simmons and blowing him from a gun. They idolized their major, and his reappearance on parade brought about a scene nowhere provided for in the Army regulations. Great, too, was the glory that fell to Slain's share. The gunners would have made him drunk thrice a day for at least a fortnight. Even the colonel of his own regiment complimented him upon his coolness, and the local paper called him a hero. These things did not puff him up when the major offered him money, and, thanks, the virtuous corporal took the one and put aside the other. But he had a request to make, and prefaced it with many a "Beg I pardon, sir." Could the major see his way to letting the Slain Kenna wedding be adorned by the presence of 4 battery horses to pull a hired barouche? The major could, and so could the battery. Excessively so. It was a gorgeous wedding. "What did I do it for?" said Corporal Slain. "For the 'orses, o' course. Johnsy ain't a beauty to look at, but I wasn't goin' to ave a hired turnout, Jerry Blazes. If I 'adn't a wanted something, Sim might ha' blowed Jerry Blazes blooming eed into Hirish stew for aught it a cared." And they hanged Private Simmons, shanged him as high as Hammond in Hollow Square of the regiment, and the colonel said it was drink, and the chaplain was sure it was the devil, and Simmons fancied it was both, but he didn't know, and only hoped his fate would be a warning to his companions. And half a dozen intelligent publicists wrote 6 beautiful leading articles on the prevalence of crime in the Army. But not a soul thought of comparing the bloody-minded Simmons to the squawking, gaping schoolgirl with which this story opens.